To the Point with Congressman Bill Pascrell, focusing on the concerns and issues facing the families of New Jersey's 9th Congressional District.
Hello, I'm Congressman Bill Pascrell. I'd like to welcome you to the latest edition of To the Point. The political landscape in Washington has changed. With new faces filing into the Capitol, a new president occupying the White House, and new challenges to Congress to tackle. The atmosphere in Washington is changing. We're looking to the future leaders, uncertain of what the next few years will bring, but certain that for my guest, it will bring opportunities to contribute in major ways. Josh Gottheimer, we're honored to have you here. He's a former speechwriter for President Bill Clinton and the newest member of New Jersey's Congressional delegation. Congratulations, Josh, again.
Thanks, Bill.
District 5, 5th District of New Jersey, which is a neighboring district to my district, the 9th District. Represents parts of Bergen County, including Hackensack and Paramus, as well as the large swaths of Sussex and Warren, and even northern Passaic County. Before being elected, Josh spent time with Microsoft and Ford, so he understands the private sector very, very well. And with the Federal Communications Commission, you were there for 2 years. Josh has also authored a few books, including Ripples of Hope, Great American Civil Rights Speeches. I have not read it. I must confess, but I will.
We only sold one copy, so it's impossible.
So thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Bill.
Josh, how you doing? You've been here for 6-7 months, but you look better than the President of the United States who's been here 6 or 7 months. So what do you attribute the fact that you look so optimistic and jolly this morning?
Well, I'm sitting with you, one of my favorite people in Washington.
Thank you.
And as a quick aside, I just want to say that part of what's made my experience so far so great is actually having good people to mentor me. And what I've realized is how important that is, because getting settled in, it's a steep learning curve in the beginning. There's a lot to know, a lot of procedures on the House floor, and making sure that you always keep an eye on the most important thing was back home and your constituents and taking care of folks and fighting for the people you represent. And that's been something that I've been very lucky to have a great mentor. He's sitting a few inches from me, and to remind me about what's most important all the time, and also how this place operates. So I'm very grateful.
When I was elected in 1996, it seems like 28,000 years ago. When I got here, the first thing that came into my mind, and I was consumed with Josh, and I want your reaction to this and compare it to your first impressions.
Yeah.
It's one thing to look at, it's another thing when you're in there, was that I'm glad I was the mayor of Paterson, New Jersey. It groomed me, it kept my feet on the ground, boots on the ground, and I was ready for war. If need be. When you're a mayor, you got to be ready for anything. You can't hide under any desk. And I'm glad I had that past experience also in the state legislature of New Jersey. You didn't have that kind of experience, but do you see that that's important, or you substituted something else in your experience?
No, there are a couple of things I think had a real impact on me. One, working with President Clinton, when I worked in government, understanding the importance of actually working together, and being willing to work across the aisle to move the ball forward. And what President Clinton always taught us was, don't worry, there are a lot of great ideas out there. Don't worry if they're yours. Just worry if they're good, and then everyone will get credit. And I thought that was a very important.
I think that was one of his strengths, President Clinton's.
Great strength. And then and by the way, always stand up. That means you got to stand up for your principles, what you believe in, but there are times where you're not going to get everything you want, and that's okay, because it's more important to move forward. And the second thing, in business, you also have to take those similar principles. I sat around a lot of tables. I did a lot of, we were either buying a company or looking at starting a new product, and you start really far apart with everyone around the table. You're not necessarily on the same page, but you got to work it and be willing to, you're going to get 80% of what you want. You're not always going to get the full loaf. And so both those experiences taught me a lot in terms of what I'm hoping to bring to Washington now. And the other thing that I find really surprising, and I'm sure you probably found this too, is people, if you make the effort, people actually get along really well. Your colleagues on both sides of the aisle there's plenty of good people, but it takes effort, right? You're not just if you just sit in your seat and don't make the effort.
Deal.
Right.
You know?
Right. But I mean, right, if you got to develop relationships really matter.
Right.
Right. And I know you have a lot of relationships.
In 96 and 98, Gingrich said a few times in so many different words, Mr. President, you're irrelevant.
Yeah.
And Congress folks on the other side, you're irrelevant. He had to eat those words. He had to make a deal with the President of the United States. He had to reach out to the President of the United States and to Democrats. And the very people he brought to office in 1994 were the very people that turned on Newt Gingrich. His own flesh and blood turned on him. The Democrats didn't chase Newt Gingrich out. Republicans chased him out.
Right.
And I remember I was on the floor the last day he gave his speech, and they turned on him for many reasons, justified, not justified, and he gave them a tongue lashing. And I'll never forget that day. And when he walked out of that speech, I happened to be in the hall with him. There was only 9 or 10 people on the floor at the time. I walked out. He could never remember my name, so he called me Mayor. He knew I was a mayor. Hey, Mayor, how you doing? I said, you know what? These are the very people you... He just gave it one of these kinds of things. What did you learn from Clinton, besides what you just said?
I mean, there's so many things I learned. I mean, I learned the importance of, he, better than anybody, got that all politics was local, right? And you know, he was...
You believe that?
Was...
Do you accept that?
I completely believe that.
And what do you mean by that?
I mean that...
I know what I mean, but what do you mean?
I mean that at the end of the day, you have a job here, you're a representative. And you have to, right? And that's a very specific job you're hired for versus other jobs in government. It means no one else represents this group of people who, you know, that in your communities, and it's their points of view that you have to bring to Washington. And that means that, by the way, it's not always going to align with everybody else who's in your party, right? And that's a really important distinction, right? Because there's issues that matter. I was thinking last night, there were amendments that we were voting on late last night against transportation, if you remember, right? And I'm thinking, how are these other members of Congress introducing legislation that are going to hurt railroads in the country and trains that get back and forth and Amtrak, and thinking that would never, like, how could you do that? And so I go pull up the members' map and I'm looking at their hometown and their areas. I'm like, okay, they have no trains. They don't care. Yeah, well,
right? That's a problem.
Right? But that's a huge problem. But I'm saying to myself, how could you even think about that? For us, it's so important.
Very important.
It's essential.
When I was elected to the United States, to the New Jersey legislature, I made a promise to myself and the staff that came on board that we're going to find out about the farms of South Jersey. And they looked at me and I said, what is this guy, crazy? I said, if I'm expecting them to know the problems of transit in North Jersey,
exactly,
and how it affects our lives, how it affects the economy, how it affects me going to work, you know? If I want them to understand that, not very different, Josh, than a Montana rancher knowing about New Jersey transit. Not different, really, in the overall picture here.
Right.
Then I want them to know about what I'm doing, what my folks are doing, and what my folks are into, because I may be able to influence his vote somewhere down the line.
Right.
I went to the Congress the same way, and I know that you are too. You have a vast district. It's a big area.
Big area.
The whole part of North Bergen.
Yes.
Okay? Then you go swing over to Sussex County. I mean, you know.
Yeah. It's much more rural.
The open world of West Virginia, almost, for crying out loud.
Beautiful place. Beautiful.
Warren County, in between.
Same thing. Beautiful
and the
farms,
northern part of Passaic County.
Yeah.
So you're going from the hustle and bustle of Hackensack,
yes,
and you're going right into the...
I mean, vastly different issues.
Right.
Right. I mean, a few issues that are the same. I don't care where you go. People tell me their taxes are too high. Right. no matter where I go, it's expensive to live in New Jersey. They want to make things more affordable.
Right.
They're worried about their housing, house prices, and be able to sell their homes. They're worried about jobs, be able to get a job, right? I mean, things that we all deal
Absolutely.
with, right? And that's consistent.
And here are these folks out in the western part of your district who have very different kinds of needs
Yes.
than the folks in Hackensack
Yes.
or Paramus, okay? But there are some common things as you've talked about. And the further you get away from the hustle and bustle of our bigger towns, the more you get to folks who don't want the government involved in anything. The further you stay away from me, the better off I'm going to be, the better off my community is going to be. Until Hurricane Harvey hits, and then we want the government.
Right.
How do you bridge that gap?
I think it's a great question. I mean, I think there are clearly roles for the government, important roles for the government to play, and take something that you spend an enormous amount of time on, firefighting, right, and first responders, law enforcement, making sure that our communities are safe, protected against, right, criminals, against terrorists, making sure that we keep that, right. What's great about our towns, whether you're in Warren County or you're in Patterson,
Right.
wherever you are, what's great about our towns is that they're beautiful places and they're great schools,
Right.
and you got to keep them, and keeping, making sure that Paramus and Hackensack are safe is critical, and why it's a reason why people want to be there.
Right.
And so that, it's interesting. So when you, to your point, when people bring up government and the role of government, I always say, well, you want to make sure that the streets are paved, right?
Right.
Because that's really important. You got to get around. Yeah, we want that. So that's a very important function of government. You want to be able to get to work on time. You want to make sure that our communities are safe, that your schools are good. Those are all roles, that our water is clean to drink, right? Those are all places where government.
Geez, I hope we all want clean water.
Right? You think, but by the way, that takes.
Yeah.
But meantime, a lot of our schools, there's there's lead in the water.
Right.
And I got young kids. Like I worry a lot about that, and so do a lot of parents.
I'm shocked by the number of people who came to this Congress in the last, particularly since 2010, that really minimize the role of government. Now, I know the less government, the better government, but the fact is that the government is part of our lives. The point is we control the government in a democracy, much more so than we do in a dictatorship. How to keep that balance is, important. Sometimes we go too far this way, we go too far the other way, which is, the natural beast. But the point is that we try to control it within democratic principles.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly right. And I think it's smart, sensible government, right?
Right.
I mean, appropriate government, and that's how I look at it, right? There are places where I believe in the private sector. I believe that the market drives our country. The market, people work in the private sector, small businesses, bigger businesses. That's where people in our country work, right? And that's very important that we have a prosperous private sector. But also you have to balance that to make sure that there's good government too. And that's why I believe in the kind of the middle. I think anytime the pendulum swings one way or the other too far, we should
Right.
get it back.
So the extremes of both parties.
I generally believe.
You're a bit
yeah.
dubious about.
Well, no, I just believe, as my dad always said to me, he said, "Josh, all good things in moderation."
Yeah.
And I think that's right. I think all
That's
good.
what Confucius said.
Yes.
See, your father.
My dad came after Confucius.
Oh.
Yeah. But
Of course.
But he was. But it's true, right? I mean, this idea.
What have you changed your mind about in terms of government should not be involved in this? Why are we even talking about this? Has anything like that happened since you got it? In 7 months.
No, but I think I had a perception, this gets back to where we started, I don't know what you think about this, but that it was much more contentious within. The issues are contentious. It's much more contentious within, that it was much more contentious within, that people were contentious. I don't actually find that. I find that people are willing to engage, with different points of view, are willing to engage. The question is, how do we do more? And I'm sure you have plenty of thoughts on this because you've been around longer. How do we get people, more settings for people to actually talk to each other? Because I think we could find more common ground if we actually had more sensible conversations that weren't just us screaming or people screaming on television at each other or sending out nastyograms. How do you get people to cooperate? And because you think about it, the caucuses are separate, right? You have your meetings. They're separate meetings. Besides orientation as a freshman, there's not much time where you're actually together, right, unless you go on a delegation overseas somewhere to Afghanistan or Iraq together, where it's bipartisan. Otherwise, there's not. I was just in Israel on a bipartisan trip.
Yeah.
But otherwise, there aren't a lot of venues for it unless you join something.
So maybe we should have a universal caucus once in a while.
Yeah, but don't you think they're like? What have you seen that change over time, or it's always been this way?
It's because I think with when I came in, Gingrich was the speaker, and I knew about what had happened 5 years previous, and he took a long time to get to that position. He studied the Turks and the generals and how they got to where they were doing, what they were doing. Used those tactics, and the Gingrich Revolution happened. But there was a real divisiveness that I would say was worse then than it even is now. Was worse.
In public or on the between
both,
colleagues?
Both. In both. And I would say that Gingrich, that's why they turned on him. I think they were looking at, hey, we got the majorities. We got Clinton where we want him. He's going to be all by himself, like they thought they had President Obama.
Right.
And they went after him with vengeance, and yet they had to reach out to him to get a budget passed. And we had 3 years of balanced budget. Right. We hadn't done that for 33 years before that, and we haven't done it since. That's quite obvious. We can't even put a budget together at this point.
Right.
And I don't think it's because of our divisiveness so much. I think this is the leftover from the Gingrich realm. I think we're going to go into an age of cooperation within the next 10 years. That's what I believe. That's where we're heading. You joined a group within the Congress, the problem solvers. Mm-hmm. I think that's a pretty cool thing. I wasn't impressed by the name, but that's unimportant. And you guys have been sitting down and talking about health care. One of the things you've been talking about.
Yes.
And I think you've reached over in the Democrats and Republicans who go to these meetings. I know many of them, good people. Charlie Dent, Pennsylvania, to me, he's a Republican that could be thinking about running for president. He has a disposition that way. He's a good guy, good person, good at heart. That doesn't mean I have to agree with him on everything, but that's not what we're talking about.
No.
And I've seen what you come up with. Give us a quick capsule of what's happened in this experience, the problem solvers.
I know you want to change the name. I got it. So the caucus it's 43 members of Congress. Roughly evenly split between Democrats and Republicans. We meet most weeks that we're in Washington. In fact, we got a meeting tomorrow morning. We have
be interesting to get their take on what just happened, the deal that
yesterday,
Trump made,
deal.
The president made with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer.
That would be interesting.
With the other guys in the room too.
Get the response.
Man, I would have wished I was a bug in that. Right on that wall, listening to that stuff.
Yeah, I don't think Republican leadership's too happy right now.
I don't think so either.
No,
I've talked to them.
No, but I mean that's the question. Will the president start to reach out to Democrats more on some of these issues, like tax reform, like infrastructure, which, as you and I agree, is critical, the Gateway Project and others.
Yeah, how about that project?
Which is right. This is very, very important to get that going. And we've spent a lot. So we've been focused on tax reform, infrastructure, and we picked up health care. We weren't ever going to touch health care. It has been the third rail this entire, and it's been completely partisan, one-sided throughout this Congress. And as you know, for years now, 7 years, the Republicans have been trying to kill the ACA, and we looked at in these last months how bad it got. There was no outreach at all.
A lot of bad feelings, by the way, in the Congress were precipitated by those fights over health care.
Of course.
I mean, they didn't do anything. I bring up the example back 12 years ago when we passed Plan D for prescription drugs.
Right.
And I voted no. I told my seniors I was going to vote no. How are you going to vote no? Because this is going to help us. No, I said, there's a part here between the $2,200 and $5,200 where you're going to be paying premiums and not getting any benefits. The donut hole, the famous donut hole.
Yeah, the donut hole.
And I said,
which, by the way, would have been blown back open on what they passed through Congress.
That's correct.
Right. I mean, part of what we feared and what would have been so bad for New Jersey, as you and I talked about, if the House bill would cost an average of every family in New Jersey, because of what the dollars lost to the state.
Absolutely.
$4,000 tax increase
Yeah.
per family in the state of New Jersey.
Yep.
Seniors kicked out of their nursing homes.
Yep.
Right, destabilizing the marketplace. So what we said was we're not going to settle. The problem solver said we're not going to do a whole bill for health care. But what you have is an immediate problem right now. The market, the individual marketplace, is falling apart because the administration was deciding month by month whether or not to make these payments. They're called cost-sharing payments
Which sets
to
up
states.
all kinds of anxiety.
Yeah, yes, because what happens is if you're an insurance company and you're trying to provide coverage and you don't know if you're going to get this cost-sharing help for those who are the patients with the most health care issues, to help you with those people. If you don't get that, premiums up 15 to 20% in New Jersey, right, and across the country.
We've lost the market.
Right.
Let me ask you this question: do you think you can save the ACA by bringing about some cooperation with folks who are not in your party?
I think
or
yes.
do you think that this is just a slow strangulation of the ACA and going to accomplish what the Republicans have tried to do, what the president tried to do, to repeal it and put a new bill in?
Well, the bill that it's a great question. The bill that they passed in the House is untenable completely, and we saw that with John McCain in the Senate, realizing that you can't do this. It's not only draconian, but you're just going to wipe all these people out who deserve coverage, people with pre-existing conditions, right? And other Americans who rely on this. So the question is, if you don't pass legislation, my fear is that it's death by 1,000 cuts, right? They'll just try to not make these payments to the states. Premiums will go up 15, 20% as they are.
No question about it.
The choices will disappear in the individual marketplace. And then on top of that, which is, as I'm sure you'd agree, on top of that, they've said we're not going to actually inform and educate people anymore about their choices, right? We're cutting off all those programs. So you can actually, my fear is you kill it without even having to pass legislation. What we've proposed in a bipartisan way, we passed this, 43 members of Congress passed this together and said, hold on, what if we actually, we can't let this go, we can't let this fall apart, let's stabilize it. Let's actually make these payments, that we have to make. Let's do reinsurance in the states.
The president hasn't decided that yet either.
No, so we in the House, this week there are hearings in the Senate, Lamar Alexander and Patty Murray, bipartisan hearings in the Senate over there on this piece that we proposed, very similar. Governors Hickenlooper and Kasich also have proposed with, I think, 7 other governors, a very similar plan to deal with stabilizing the marketplace, getting things back under control, getting premiums down for people. This is one area, Bill, where I actually think we can make some progress, and if we do, it's a home run. It'll come back over to us. I don't know if it happens, but you have to try, and that's my feeling overall. You got to try.
Right, and I'm glad you've got a feeling and an attitude that this is not going to be a one-shot deal, that you're going to do everything you can to perpetuate this, to move this on, not only to health care, but to other issues, but health care being primary, of course, right now.
Yes, we have to. People understand this. If we don't do something, it will. My fear is it will die, and millions of Americans, including so many people in New Jersey, people we represent, will be without coverage, without health care, right? And that is unacceptable to both of us.
You took over for defeated a gentleman who had been a congressman there for several years, several terms. And I remember the first thing that you and I talked about when you were running for office. I really didn't know you early on.
I was seeing your office, I remember.
Yeah. And
your phones kept ringing. There were 3 phones and all of them kept ringing.
I said to you, I hope that you will understand, as I came to understand, and maybe that's because I was a mayor, I don't know, had something to do with it, that your constituents come first, servicing them. Because we think all the action is down in Washington, D.C. And we forget many times our constituents. They have Social Security problems.
Checks,
They have veteran problems. They have old age problems. You know, there are problems when you get older, like myself. You got problems.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, your congressman, he or she, may be down in Washington thinking about all of these grandiose and esoteric plans for the saving of the world, and you can't even save your own neighborhood.
Correct.
And I think you understand that. I've watched you. You've been into the districts that folks are not used to seeing the congressman. Even the person who lived there wasn't around. You're into Warren County, Sussex County, Northern Bergen County. top of Passaic County. And I think that goes a long ways. It may not be romantic, and it may not be sexy, because the sexy thing is having your front page picture. And, you know, that you're with this issue, when you're with that issue, you're you're just going to save the world issue. But people have problems. Are you satisfied
I will never
with your
forget what you told
caseworker?
me. No, I will never forget. We've got case workers. I'll never forget this. You've said many things that are very wise that I've adopted. One, you said to me, is like, you said, make sure you read every local paper, because what matters is what goes on locally in every town. We've been to all 79 towns already in my by the first 6 months, all 79 towns in my district, a lot of towns to cover. Because we set up tables everywhere saying, you got a Social Security issue, you got a veteran issue. Frankly, you got a pothole. Like, I do potholes, right? You got a problem you got in your street, call me. I'll call the mayor too and say, hey, can we do something about this? Let me help out. Let me help out. Because you said to me, that's, at the end of the day, that's what we can do. That's the most hands-on and effective. And how people relate to government. It's not just that, we've got to worry about protecting people, which is critical, which is why you do so much also for law enforcement and first responders. But at the end of the day, we got to also make sure that all the things that are on their mind, that we look out for them.
Hey, Josh, I really appreciate that you come on today. We had no break, okay? No commercial, because this is important for people to hear. We wish you the best of luck.
Thanks, Bill.
You've been a great representative in the Senate. I'm not just blowing smoke. I watch things. I'll tell you straight, as you know.
I know.
And I know you're going to do a good job, and take care of your constituents.
I will. And thank you for everything you do for
the guy that's
on
the highest hill in Sussex County. Make sure you get to him.
Well, thanks for all you do, Bill. I really am grateful.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.
God bless.
Thanks.
I want to thank Josh again, and I want to thank you for watching this to the point. I want to thank Josh because he's does a tremendous service for his constituents and for our country. You've heard our thoughts, and I want to hear from you. So you send us your comments, your concerns, your questions to the address that will appear on the screen. I want to hear from you. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on To the Point.
I'm a retired school psychologist, and helping people was my thing.
I was very independent and thought I could take care of myself. I fell, and I had to have Meals on Wheels.
After my stroke, when Meals on Wheels started, I was on the other end of the stick, so to speak.
Meals on Wheels, coming to my door as someone who's housebound, having someone check on me, assures me that I'm not forgotten.
Meals on Wheels has given me a mode of freedom that I wouldn't have otherwise.
We're the clients.
We are the clients.
We are the clients of Meals on Wheels.
America, let's do lunch.
1 in 6 seniors faces the threat of hunger, and millions more live in isolation. Drop off a hot meal and say a quick hello. Volunteer by donating your lunch break at americaletsdolunch.org.